Hello everybody, welcome to episode 4 of the BIVBlog, Benedict's IT video blog. I'm still Benedict Stockebrand, and in case you wonder if I was running out of funny black t-shirts, no, I don't. It's just that I had some sort of business meeting this afternoon and decided you might as well get a glimpse of my dark side. Okay. In the previous episode, I've explained how to come up with some sort of addressing plan for IPv6 down to the subnet prefix level. But what we still have to talk about today are interface IDs. And if you want to configure interface IDs, the first thing, of course, you have to keep in mind is that in some cases you have very limited control over these. If you use stateless address auto configuration or dynamically allocated DHCP addresses, there's rather little you can do. In some cases, the interface ID might actually be configurable, but there are very few implementations that actually let you do that. So when you use auto configuration or dynamic address pools, pretty much all your chances are off. If you use DHCP, at least you can come up with a specific address range for DHCP, but that's pretty much it. So what we want to focus on now is addresses that are either statically configured on the machine or through some static settings in your DHCP server. The first thing you want to be aware of in this case is that if machines are allowed to talk to the outside or to some potentially hostile environments, these addresses will contain information usable to an attacker if the interface IDs follow some sort of schema. If that's a concern to you, generally I recommend use randomized statically configured addresses and avoid this sort of problem. But from my personal experience and what I consider normal, this is a rather unlikely situation. Machines that are allowed to communicate directly to the outside are frequently visible anyway. Normally they are using static addresses because they provide some sort of service, and they are easy to find through the DNS anyway. And otherwise you use firewall setup with an application level gateway in between, so only the address from the application level gateway is visible to the outside. So how can we get interface IDs in such a way that they are easy to handle, easy to remember, easy to recognize, and easy to work with? First of all, there are a couple address ranges that you shouldn't use. Interface ID 0:0:0:0 is used for the subnet router anycast address, and even if your routers don't currently use that, it's reserved for the purpose, so you should really stay away from it. And with auto configuration, when you use MAC addresses to generate the interface IDs, in the first byte, bit number 1, or the 7th bit if you count from the most significant bit downwards, is set to 1 on addresses that are generated from a MAC address, because that bit in a MAC address means that this is a globally unique address, link layer address in that case. So best thing is probably just to keep the first 16-bit block set to 0 anyway, and use colon notation to keep your addresses reasonably easy to type. Good. Now, there are 3 interface IDs that I recommend for specific purpose, and that's that's 0:0:0:1 to 3, which I reserve for name servers. Simple reason for that: you want to be able to remember these stupid addresses, because if you don't and there is something going wrong, you have a problem, and you frequently have to configure the address of your name server somewhere anyway. Beyond that, I just count up. And there's one trick you should keep in mind now that you have addresses at your disposal and that's don't recycle addresses. This is something where all long-time IPv4 admins get completely shocked. What do you mean? Whenever you've used an interface ID for something, consider it burned. Don't use it anymore. If that interface ID still shows up in some sort of access list or packet filter rule or whatever, then it can't do much harm if it's not recycled. Simple as that. Aside from that, it actually makes handling of interface IDs simpler. Point number 2, if you use physical machines to run multiple services, then I suggest you assign one address to the physical machine and then one address per service. So if you ever have to move one service to another machine, you can just maintain the address and maintain the address with the service and just move it to another machine. So if you have, for example, a single machine serving as name server, time server, syslog server, and I don't know what else, small stuff, then use different services and use different interface IDs for different services. It's just going to simplify your life. Finally, I treat routers differently. Why is that? Partly organizational issues. In large enterprises, the network people and the server people are frequently different groups with different specialties, and if you just make sure that some take care of these addresses, some take care of those addresses, it just simplifies life. Additionally, it helps to make routers easily identifiable. What I've used so far is a scheme that says routers have an interface ID of 0:0:FEED, because you can't write router with hexadecimal digits, but you can write feed, and then a router number. Very simple, very straightforward, and very convenient. And some time ago I tried to use some scheme that used a router number and an interface number on that router, but I quickly found out that it's not really that helpful. If you see those addresses or interface IDs, you can decide which interface on a router it is. That's on the plus side. On the downside, it means if you have to configure an address, you have to check which interface is this connected to, and it's just not really worth the hassle. So these are a couple of recommendations, but again, most important thing is make sure you keep these things consistent throughout your network, because that's what's going to make your life as a system administrator, network administrator simple. And after all, that's the sort of thing we want, right? Keep things simple, keep work levels down, and get a chance for a cup of tea every once in a while, even at work. Okay, so much about interface IDs and addressing plans in general. I know this is just one suggestion for a solution. There is no one-size-fits-all approach for this topic. So if you want to discuss, move over to the forum. Otherwise, hopefully see you again soon. Bye.